I went to Target and I got a bunch of different dairy options there. Okay, I got kind of one from each category because I wanted to be able to help you break down and understand what the best options for dairy are when you go to a store like Target. Now, you don't have to go to Target. I just did Target because it was easy and a lot of people shop there. A lot of people just get their basic groceries there. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna dive right in. You're gonna learn about cottage cheese, you're gonna learn about regular milk, you're gonna learn about cheese. I'll try to make this brief and as informative as possible so you know what to avoid and what to have. Let's start with good old-fashioned regular milk. All right, milk is a little bit sketchy to get in the first place. Most of the protein that comes out of milk is going to be a beta casein protein, about 30% of it. Now, word to the wise, casein protein is not the best kind of protein for your body, okay? Here's the thing. Usually it's very high in what is called BCM7. Now BCM7 is a bioactive opioid peptide, which means that it quite literally has an effect on your opioid receptors, just like some street drugs would. So it's not good stuff. You have to be very careful with that. So the reason that I grabbed A2 was because it's a very clear example of getting good clean dairy, good clean milk. You always want to opt for any kind of good quality dairy that's going to come from an A2 protein, which I'll talk about more. It's not a brand recommendation. It's literally just to get the point across. We have A1 proteins and A2 casein proteins. Okay, A1 casein is the kind of casein that you're going to see in most modern day milk, most modern day cows, okay? It's a genetic mutation that's occurred over the last 5,000 years. 5,000 years ago, all cows produced A2 milk. So now some farms have focused on producing cows that only are A2, which means that it's potentially easier to digest, but it doesn't have that bioactive opioid known as BCM7. Case in point though, milk is a complicated area to navigate and you should probably just avoid milk altogether, especially if you're on keto. Then the carbs just aren't going to work for you in the first place. All right, let's move on to Greek yogurt. It's important that you know a little bit about Greek yogurt. And again, it's not any particular brand or anything like that. Go for organic whenever possible. But here's kind of the facts about Greek yogurt. So basically they take milk and they add two kinds of bacteria, usually Thermophilus and some forms of Bulgaricus. So these two types of bacteria get added to milk and they're allowed to ferment. And that's essentially what starts to create the yogurt culture. Okay, then it's strained. And it's strained multiple times to ultimately leave you with a little bit more of a solid protein, right? So when you look at regular yogurt, it's strained twice, draining some of the whey out, draining some of the liquid out, but you're still left with a lot of sugar and a lot of carbohydrates. The whole point with Greek is it's strained 3 to 4 times. So that's why it's thicker, and that's why you have a higher protein content and a lower carbohydrate content. Because along with the water goes the whey and also goes a lot of the milk sugars. So Greek yogurt generally is still pretty darn good. However, if it's not good quality, you can still end up with those casein proteins that can be hard on the body and still be potentially inflammatory. We have to remember anything dairy related, we could have an inflammatory response to. We just have to make sure that we're exercising best efforts to get the highest quality stuff. So Greek yogurt would be good to go on keto because it's lower carb than regular yogurt. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about heavy cream versus half and half here for a second. People will generally think that half and half is the better option to go with because it's going to be lower calorie. Yes, it is lower calorie because it's only about 12% milk fat, whereas heavy cream is going to be 30 to 40% milk fat. And again, at first glance, you think, well, milk fat, I don't want milk fat. Well, there's actually been studies that show that the specific kinds of fat that come from dairy are actually good when they're isolated. So those specific fats can actually contribute to a healthy heart. So studies that show that it's a decreased risk of cardiovascular disease. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now. I wanna focus more on the fat burning side of things, talking about conjugated linoleic acid. So when you look at dairy fat, you have something known as CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. Now CLA has some powerful effects within the body. It's technically an omega-6, but again, not gonna go down that rabbit hole. So there's a study that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that found that particular isomers of CLA, so components of milk fat, could alter white adipose tissue to ultimately impair adipose tissue from being stored. So all in short, what that means is that dairy fat could change the structure in how our bodies store fat in the white adipose tissue. Does that mean if you consume a bunch of calories from heavy whipping cream, you're not going to gain fat? It doesn't mean that at all. That's not what I'm saying. Just saying there are some indirect effects from conjugated linoleic acid. So you want to opt for the higher fat option whenever you can. But more importantly, on keto, this is going to be lower carb with the heavy cream, And it's also going to have less of the milk in it. Half and half is just like the name implies, half cream, half milk, which means you're getting all the milk sugars and you're getting more of the potential BCM7 in the low quality milk with the half and half, whereas you have a higher ratio of heavy cream and fat coming from the heavy cream. So definitely recommend you go for heavy cream. If you're going to put something in your coffee, go with the heavy cream. Don't use half and half. It's a waste of your money. You get more bang for your buck and it tastes a heck of a lot better if you go with the heavy cream. Now we get to my favorite. All right, cottage cheese. So cottage cheese is cool. So how they make cottage cheese is they take milk and they add specific cultures or specific acids to it and they allow it to curdle. It's the one time we really want it to curdle right. So they allow it to curdle and then they allow it to dry a little bit. So they take that curdle, how it's kind of all been, I guess it kind of gels up and it curdles up, and they dry that out a little bit. Then they cut it even more so that more liquid drains out of it. So they literally cut the curds so that whey and water and sugar comes out of it. Then they dry it and heat it a little bit more. So yes, it's processed in that sense that it's heated again, but that cooks out even more of the water, more of the whey, and more of the lactose. So you're left with a really pure form of protein. Now, in essence, it is pure casein protein, very little whey protein. Some of you might be watching this video thinking that whey protein is good, but whey protein is only good in moderation. Whey protein does trigger an insulin spike. Now, the benefit of cottage cheese, it's going to be something that you're going to want to eat maybe before bed because it's going to digest slowly. First of all, mechanically it digests slowly, but secondly, because it's the casein proteins, those proteins gel up in your stomach a little bit and they take a longer time to break down. So if you're looking for something to continually feed your muscles overnight, cottage cheese is good with that. But full disclaimer, cottage cheese is really, really hard to find in a clean fashion. So I will say Target is awesome because they carry Good Culture. So you can get Good Culture at Target. I've seen it at Whole Foods. They've got it at Sprouts. They've got it at a number of different stores now. And they even have some versions that are like their keto versions. They're heavy cream. So like a 6% milk fat versus just a 4%, which again adds into exactly what I was talking about with the heavy cream. It's one thing to get the proteins, but when you can actually get the healthy milk fats in there too, it drives the carb content down and it gives you the healthy fats, the healthy conjugated linoleic acids, along with the slow digesting proteins. So highly recommend Good Culture. I'll go ahead and I'll put a link down below so that you can at least check them out and read about them because I'm very, very happy that Target carries them and super, super awesome. So something you need to be checking out if cottage cheese is something that has been missing out of your life because usually you have a bunch of different, what you normally see when you see cottage cheese. Things in there. You have a bunch of different stabilizers, a bunch of different gels. Point is, cottage cheese was out of my life until Good Culture came around, and now it's back. Okay, let's jump over to cheeses for a second. Quick note on cheeses. The older and the more aged the cheese, the better. Simply put, aged cheese is going to be dried, which means that the water that holds the lactose and a lot of the whey and things like that gets dried out just naturally. So when we jump over to cheeses for a second, I want to talk about Parmesan because Parmesan is probably the best cheese that you could get. It's unpasteurized, so it's not very processed, but then it's dried out. So you lose a lot of the lactose, you lose a lot of the whey, and you basically are just left with, again, a casein protein, and you're left with some cultures. So pretty clean stuff. It's also going to be a very, very low carb content. So Parmesan cheese is going to be one of the best options that you can go with in that case. Then we jump over to goat cheese, my personal favorite in the world of cheeses. Remember the whole A2 thing I was talking about? Well, goat cheese by default is A2. Okay, goats are not going to be the A1 type protein. They're not going to be that A1 casein. They're naturally A2. So goat milk, goat cheese, goat yogurt, goat sour cream, things like that are all really, really good to go. Also, sheep's feta, goat's feta would fall into this category too. Another fun fact, goat cheese, you know how it gives you that little tangy taste? That interesting taste that comes from goat cheese, believe it or not, is caused by caprylic acid. So there's bacteria that is in goat cheese that reacts and creates caprylic acid, which is a form of MCT, medium chain triglyceride. So yeah, goat cheese converts into caprylic acid. It converts into a form of MCT within your body. And it just so happens to convert into, again, caprylic, which is the highest ketone generating MCT that's out there. So if you are doing a low carb ketogenic diet and you're trying to generate more ketones, goat cheese is going to allow you to create more ketones, at least potentially, and at least based on what we see in the research and on paper, given that it converts into caprylic acid. That's just a fun fact. That tangy taste that you get is actually coming from MCT oil that bacteria converts. It's pretty awesome stuff. Jumping over to sour cream for a minute. Sour cream, very similar setup to cottage cheese, except we're not not curdling it, and we're adding streptococcus, a different kind of bacteria. So it's amazing how we learn that different bacteria that are in our guts do different things, right? Well, different bacteria will do different things to dairy. So normally sour cream isn't going to make the cut simply because it usually has a lot of stabilizers and stuff in there too. I grabbed one just to show you. And if you get light sour creams, you have to be extra careful because a lot of times they'll add sugar into the mix to make it taste a little bit better. So just be careful, but sour cream is cultured and you do get a little bit of that probiotic effect similar to what you would get with yogurt and cottage cheese. Target didn't have it this time around, but Good Culture actually makes a cottage cheese too, so you may have that in your Whole Foods, you may have that in your grocery store, so just keep an eye out for that. Okay, now I want to jump over to the processed stuff for a second, just so you have an idea. Very important that you know when you read labels what pasteurized processed is versus pasteurized processed product versus cheese food. Okay, there's a lot of different things. So example, if we look at this, this is pasteurized prepared cheese product. Okay. If it's a cheese product, that means it's less than 51% cheese. If it's a pasteurized processed cheese food, it's 51% and up. And if it's pasteurized processed cheese, it can still be 100% cheese. Okay, so recapping, pasteurized processed cheese can still be 100% cheese, okay? Then we have pasteurized processed cheese food is 51% cheese and up. Okay, and then pasteurized processed product is less than 51%. So things like American cheese, stuff like that. Then this is a good example of still processed cheese, but it's 100% cheese, but it's still processed, right? So this is still technically a processed cheese, but it's not the same as processed food product or cheese product. Very important that you look for the word product. It's hiding in a lot of things. A lot of times like pepper jack cheese and stuff like that, you think you're getting a good cheese, but when you look at it, it's either a cheese food or a cheese product, which means you're not getting real cheese. You're getting more hydrogenated stuff, you're getting more toxins and poisons than you are actual cheese. So I hope that this gave you a general lay of the land if you're going to a grocery store to pick your cheeses. I would say the best dairy that you could opt for, if I were to have to put them in order, I would say cottage cheese from a good brand, goat cheese, that's probably order number one, and then I'd go to heavy cream after that, and then I'd go probably to Greek yogurt after that, and then I'd go to Parmesan cheese after that, and then the rest you can kind of do without, to be completely honest. So all of these are pretty solid, but that's the particular order that I would follow. Hey, I do ask that you please hit that red subscribe button and hit that little bell icon to turn on notifications, and as always, I will see you in the next video, and thank you for watching.